Here's a sentence that would have sounded absolutely insane just a few years ago. Nigel Farage thinks he can conquer London. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, but actually win council seats in the capital, challenge Labour's stranglehold on the city, and potentially unseat Sadiq Khan as mayor in 2028. The man who built his career on Brexit, who represents everything metropolitan London supposedly despises, who's been written off in the capital more times than Tottenham's been written off for the title, is now claiming he's about to trigger a political earthquake in Britain's most diverse, cosmopolitan, Remain voting city. And you know what the really terrifying thing is? He might not be completely delusional. Welcome to UK Political Insight, and today we're diving into Reform UK's audacious plan to target 6 London councils, why Sadiq Khan should be genuinely worried, and whether Nigel Farage has actually found Labour's weak spot or is about to face the most humiliating defeat of his political career. So let's break down what Farage is actually claiming here. Reform UK will be targeting 6 London councils in next year's local elections. That includes the Conservative-held boroughs of Bromley and Bexley, independently held Havering, and Labour-held Barking and Dagenham, among others. They're launching their London campaign in January, and Farage is going all in on law and order as his central message. Crime, police response, shoplifting, mobile phone theft, the stuff that affects ordinary Londoners every single day, regardless of their politics. And crucially, he's not just thinking about May 2026, he's explicitly saying he intends to challenge Khan for mayor in 2028. Now, historically, Farage and London have had a relationship best described as mutual loathing. The capital voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU, its Labour's strongest stronghold. It's diverse, cosmopolitan, young, exactly the demographic profile that tends to hate everything Farage represents. UKIP never made meaningful gains here. The Brexit Party was a non-factor in London, and the general assumption has been that Reform UK would follow the same pattern. Farage's appeal is to left-behind towns, red wall communities, places that feel ignored by metropolitan elites. London is the metropolitan elite, or at least that's the perception. So why would they vote for Farage? But Farage is making a genuinely interesting argument about why things have changed. He's pointing out that Labour's vote in London is splitting spectacularly. The Green Party under Zach Polanski has more than doubled its membership and is eating into Labour support in central London. Jeremy Corbyn standing as an independent after being kicked out of Labour. Gaza independents are organizing in areas with large Muslim populations. The left-wing vote that used to consolidate behind Labour is fragmenting into multiple competing factions. That creates opportunities for anyone who can unite opposition, and Farage thinks Reform can be that force. The comparison to US midterms is deliberate. In America, the party in power typically gets hammered in midterm elections as voters express discontent without the stakes of a presidential race. Farage is positioning May's local elections as Britain's equivalent, a chance for voters to punish Starmer's government without actually risking putting Conservatives back in number 10. And given Labour's polling collapse nationally, that's not an unreasonable calculation. If voters want to give Starmer a kicking, local elections are the perfect opportunity. The crime focus is absolutely crucial to understanding Reform's strategy. Farage is attacking both Conservatives and Labour, saying London's in big trouble, that law and order is at the heart of Reform's campaign, that crime is everywhere, and Sadiq's record is one of almost not caring about it. He points out that 87% of police stations in London closed under the Conservatives, so he's not letting them off the hook either. This is positioning Reform as the only party that will actually take crime seriously while the establishment parties fiddle while London burns. The specifics matter. Farage claims he doesn't know anybody in London who hasn't been a victim of crime. He talks about a relative whose phone was stolen, the device had a tracker, police did nothing. These are relatable stories that cut through political abstractions. Everyone knows someone who's had their phone nicked, who's experienced shoplifting if they work in retail, who feels like reporting crime is pointless because police won't respond. That frustration is real and widespread, and Farage is tapping directly into it. The broken window strategy reference is fascinating. Rudy Giuliani's approach in 1990s New York focused on prosecuting minor offenses on the theory that tolerating small crimes creates an environment where serious crime flourishes. It's controversial. Critics argue it led to over-policing and racial profiling, but it's politically potent because it promises visible action on quality-of-life issues that affect everyone. Farage saying every single shoplifting case should be prosecuted is a direct challenge to the current approach, where most incidents don't even result in police appendants, let alone charges. The statistics back up the frustration. Over 530,000 shoplifting cases reported in the year to March, only 18% leading to charges. The British Retail Corporation estimates 20 million cases across the country. That's an epidemic of retail crime that's being effectively decriminalized through non-enforcement. Shop workers face abuse and theft daily, businesses lose billions, and the perception is that nobody in authority cares. Farage promising radical change resonates. Now, Khan's office has pushed back, pointing out there were 22,000 fewer offenses across the capital last year, that burglary, robbery, theft, vehicle crime, violence with injury, and gun crime are all down. They credit record investment in the Met and hard work reducing crime. But here's the political problem. Perception matters more than statistics. If people feel less safe, if everyone has personal experiences of crime and police non-response, telling them the numbers are actually getting better doesn't work. It makes you sound out of touch and dismissive of their lived experience. The split Labour vote is Farage's biggest opportunity. In central London, young progressive voters are abandoning Labour for Greens because they see Starmer as not left-wing enough, not sufficiently committed to climate action, Palestine, progressive causes. In outer London, traditional working-class Labour voters are frustrated about immigration, crime, cost of living, the same issues driving people to reform elsewhere. So Labour is getting squeezed from both sides, losing different parts of their coalition for completely different reasons. That's catastrophically difficult to manage politically. The Green surge under Polanski is particularly dangerous for Labour. Greens are organized, motivated, and specifically targeting young urban voters who might have defaulted to Labour in the past. In local elections, where turnout is lower and every vote matters more than others, that kind of organized challenge can flip seats, and Greens taking Labour seats in central London while Reform takes outer boroughs creates a pincer movement that could devastate Labour's council control. The Gaza independent factor can't be ignored either. In areas with significant Muslim populations, Labour's position on Israel-Palestine has created fury. George Galloway proved in Rochdale that this can translate into actual victories if opposition consolidates behind a single candidate. In London, multiple boroughs have demographics where this matters enormously. If Gaza independents can organize effectively, they absolutely could take seats from Labour. Corbyn standing as an independent is another complication. He retains his seat as an independent in the general election, proving he has personal vote strength separate from a party label. If he's actively campaigning in local elections, that creates another focal point for disaffected left-wing voters who think Starmer's Labour betrayed progressive principles. So Farage's analysis that Labour faces immense problems in May isn't just wishful thinking. The structural factors are all there. The question is whether Reform can actually capitalize, because having opportunities and converting them into actual wins are very different things. Reform's never won significant representation in London. They don't have established local campaign infrastructure. London's demographics are fundamentally challenging for right-wing populism. Young, diverse, educated populations don't typically vote for Reform. But crime transcends those demographic patterns. Everyone cares about safety regardless of age, ethnicity, or education level. If Farage can make the election about law and order, about whether you feel safe walking around your neighborhood, whether police respond when you report crimes, whether anything gets done about visible disorder, those are issues that cut across traditional voting blocks. That's potentially a unifying message in a way that immigration or Brexit aren't. The targets Reform's chosen are interesting. Bromley and Bexley are conservative-held outer London boroughs that demographically look more like the rest of England than inner London. These are exactly the kinds of areas where Reform has been making gains nationally, traditional Tory suburbs and towns where voters are frustrated with conservative failure but aren't naturally Labour. If Reform can win anywhere in London, it's places like this. Havering being independently held suggests it's already politically fluid, which creates opportunities for insurgent parties. Barking and Dagenham being Labour-held and targeted shows Farage thinks he can peel off traditional working-class Labour voters in outer London the same way he has elsewhere. These are legitimate crime concerns, visible immigration, economic pressure, all the factors that drive Reform support. Khan's vulnerability in 2028 is real, but probably overstated. He's won twice, he has name recognition and strong support in inner London, and the mayoral election is a very different beast than local elections. But if Reform establishes credibility by winning council seats in 2026, if they can point to actual victories and argue they're a genuine alternative, that changes the dynamics for 2028. Suddenly, Khan faces a serious challenger on law and order, his weakest issue, rather than just token opposition. The earthquake Farage is predicting depends entirely on whether the anger and frustration about crime translates into votes for reform rather than just general disillusionment. If voters stay home or split their protest votes among multiple opposition parties, Labour survives. If reform can consolidate opposition and present as the only party serious about crime, they could genuinely shock people. The national context matters enormously. Reform's polling second in Scotland, potentially winning in Wales, making gains across England. If that momentum continues into May, London becomes part of a broader story about Labour's collapse rather than an isolated regional battle. That kind of narrative momentum can be self-fulfilling, creating bandwagon effects where reform becomes the vehicle for anti-Labour sentiment everywhere, including places they historically struggled. Farage's personal involvement is both an asset and a liability. He's polarizing. Many Londoners viscerally hate him, but he's also a skilled campaigner who generates media attention and knows how to dominate news cycles. If he's personally leading the London campaign, that raises its profile but also makes it easier for opponents to make the election about him rather than issues. The broken windows rhetoric will be controversial. Critics will point to the problems with Rudy Giuliani's approach, the racial profiling, the criminalization of poverty, the way zero